Hi everyone, I'm your host Ashley Kreze. Thanks for joining us for the third season of It's All Millennial. It's great to be back on the air discussing important topics relating to Generation Y. Let's start the show off with some interesting information from a recent survey mentioned on babycenter.com. They report that when it comes to raising children, millennials with children give their parenting skills an A+. A whopping 96% describe their parenting style as loving, while 92% describe themselves as encouraging, and 90% would describe themselves as supportive. Joining us on the show today are Karen Skinulis, Director of the Ontario Parenting Education Centre, and Brittany Bennett, New York State Licensed Mental Health Counselor with Bridge Over Troubled Water. Thank you for joining me, ladies.
My pleasure.
Yeah, great. So we have some interesting discussions today, interesting questions to explore in terms of parenting and millennials. I described the percentages in terms of numbers and how millennials would describe their parenting skills. So when you hear those high numbers, what's your first reaction?
I actually think that sounds correct. I think that today parents are putting a high stock into the kinds of relationships they're creating with their children, and those qualities that you mentioned, the encouraging, loving, supportive approach is a super high priority for parents, that they feel that this is really what's going to create a base for a good relationship and good mental health. And I think that there's a lot of information also going around and being shared, and that these things really matter to parents today.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
And how about you, Brittany? What's your first reaction?
I feel the same way. I'm actually not surprised to hear that at all. I think that even when we think back to maybe the way that we were raised by our own parents, the major difference here today is that we tend to be more connected, and I think that there's a lot of support and encouragement by society to feel more connected and more involved with our children of today as well. So I think naturally parents today feel a closer bond to their children than maybe they did with their own parents, and maybe they're bringing some traditional values from their own childhood that they want to keep consistent with their parenthood, but also involving the supportive, loving, pieces today that maybe they did not get or wanted more of in their own childhood.
No, that's a good point, and actually that's a nice segue into my next question. In terms of parenting techniques, then, given that we are more connected, perhaps as a society, do you feel that millennials' parenting skills are better than previous generations?
That's a good question.
It's a difficult question to say. Are parents today basically better than parents were in previous generations? But rather than make a value judgment about that, what I would say is that parents today have a different attitude, perhaps, about parenting. And the difference would be that today I think parents think that, first of all, parenting is probably the most important job that there is in our society. So there's this recognition that parenting is so important in terms of the influence on society and the future of how we're going to progress. And I think they feel also that it's the most difficult job that there is. So I always get that recognition when I'm talking to groups of parents. And so as a result of that, I think they feel that they need to learn about parenting. So today's generation really has the attitude that education is part of being a parent. And that's different. In the past, I don't think parents read books or magazines or watched TV shows, and they just kind of followed maybe the examples of what their parents did with them. I also think that we've gone through a major shift in terms of our basic attitude about children, and we really have to adjust. We have adjusted how we're going to treat children. So it is fundamentally different today, the way that we interact with kids. And as a result, we've had to really focus on education and learning. So I think parents today do a lot more of that than they ever did in the past.
It's good points. And I guess with that, do you feel that millennials, I know we're talking about technology and having more access to resources. As both you as being counselors in the community, do you feel, or have you noticed any new approaches or different techniques that you would say maybe stand out as enhanced skills or whatnot in terms of parenting?
In terms of technology, you mean, Ashley?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I think that there's a lot of sharing with technology. So there's a lot of things like mommy blogs, and there's all kinds of websites and internet chat rooms and things like that. So I think there's this level of connection and access to information that we never had before, and I think that's fueling this this movement towards really becoming kind of experts at parenting, like trying to figure out how to do the job well, and I think technology is a big help in that regard that we didn't have before.
You know, I guess we've been talking about, yes, you know, there's skills and sharing, and we did sort of mention a little bit earlier around, you know, some parents choosing to raise their children in a similar way that they were raised. So, you know, how do you feel about, you know, some of the traditional settings in today's society? Do you feel that some of those, you know, traditional parenting skills are still effective today?
You know what I think is, I strongly believe that the new parents of today want to incorporate maybe something that was symbolic to them as a child, maybe keeping those holiday get-togethers together, maybe a Sunday dinner. I think that whatever the millennials really valued within their own parenthood and in growing up with their parents, that they want to instill those values today, but also want to bring in again that encouraging and supportive piece to their child that maybe they did not have themselves or want more of.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It seems though that there's, you know, some difference. I know parenting has changed a little bit from previous generations in terms of what we can do and can't do, right?
Discipline.
Yeah,
absolutely.
discipline.
There's a major shift in that.
Yeah, you must see that in your practices.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, we have the pressure now of ensuring that we are assessing properly the type of parenting. There's really no right or wrong way of parenting, but when it comes to discipline, there's definitely a major change in how we were disciplined prior and how we're disciplined today. And I think today the millennials tend to want to not be as harsh maybe as their own parents were, which brings upon maybe feeling that they can't be as harsh as they were before.
Time for a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about why many millennials are opting on holding off and having children until later in life, as well as getting married. Stay tuned. If you're just joining us today, we are talking about millennials and parenting. Joining us on the show today are Karen Skinulus, Director of the Ontario Parenting Education Centre, and Brittany Bennett, New York State licensed mental health counselor with Bridge Over Troubled Water. This may come as a shock for some people, but the reports show that the number of young women planning to have children has dropped from 78% to 42% over the last 20 years. Questions, ladies? You know, that's a large number, isn't it?
It really is, and I'm shocked to hear it
Yeah,
in a way.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like there's an enormous amount of pressure for women to get married and have children.
In the past,
yeah, but
sure.
it may not really be the case today. Why do you think the change is here?
Well, I think it's a number of factors, of course. A lot of changes in society that have taken place over the last 50 years or so. Women have, with the women's movement that started in the 60s, I mean, women really kind of came into their own, and you know, with the need to develop careers and get educations, become established in secure and stable relationships before starting families. These things take time. They take a long time to develop, and I think a lot of women feel that that's what it takes to, in a sense, be more successful at parenting and have a better family base, you know, sort of that foundation. So I think that's really what we're seeing a lot of, as well. Of course, some people are saying, you know, I don't have to take that traditional course. I don't have to have a family and be a parent. And for a lot of people, they feel free now to make that decision that I would prefer to be child-free and not take on that particular responsibility. And it's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
So there's not as much pressure to conform and to do that typical role that women had.
Yeah. Brittany, how about, do you feel this is a good change?
You know, it's interesting. I don't feel that it's a bad change or a good change. I think it just really speaks to the change in general. I think that as was said earlier, there is a need almost to feel secure in our lives, whether that's financially or having some type of stability. And I think that for women in particular who feel that they need an education now, I think that comes from a place of finding the need to be independent. There's a lot of divorce rates that we have seen. I think that kind of influences our choices, and I think that for those who want to pursue an education, they want to feel secure and that their goals have been met before they even consider, okay, now I'm ready to settle down, and now I feel that not only can I support myself, but I can also support a family. I do not have to rely on my partner if they even do have a partner at that point.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot more independence.
Absolutely.
That, I think is what I'm
That's
hearing,
huge.
right? Just the sort of self-reliance, independence, and knowing that, you know, I guess so there's no need to, you know, rely on somebody else per se, although, you know, I appreciate that can happen, but.
Yeah, I think women today, for the first time, you're really seeing women saying, I could even have a family as a single person if I choose. So really all these norms and expectations are dropping, you know, and we're sort of entering into this new society, and it's different. So this is really interesting statistic that we're seeing now, that when women are given choices like this, that a lot of them make the choice that we're talking about.
Yeah. It feels so liberating.
It is.
Yes.
It is, in a sense.
No
I
cookie
think.
cutter approach to anything.
No, and as Karen had said, it's become acceptable. I think as a society, it's almost kind of encouraging. It's a society of you're responsible for yourself at the end of the day, and if you have some type of secure job or education, you are you can be satisfied that you can be dependent on yourself and not someone else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, as we've been talking about having children, and there's another statistic in terms of the average age for millennial women to get married is now 27, which is a bit of a high. What do you feel some of the benefits are to waiting later in life for marriage and or even getting married? I mean, that doesn't have to be an option anymore, right?
I think, again, I come from this place of education that I think that may influence that. If someone pursues some type of education or even a higher education, they may be more willing to leave and go to maybe another place or commute further, or they may end up in a place that's an hour or many hours from their original home. And I think that with the opportunity to have jobs elsewhere or take a job away from home, they may settle their roots elsewhere, and I think it just kind of opens up a whole new avenue of life change, and that may also be why there's a postpone in committing to marriage.
Well, things have even, I mean, changed as well. Marriage isn't, you know, we've been talking about choices, right?
Yes.
Marriage isn't the only choice, right? I guess we have common law, we have just cohabitation. Do you notice anything, you know, with that in terms of levels of satisfaction or happiness?
You know, it's in terms of a personal, you know, sense of what I meet in terms of people. I still find that people are looking for a significant other in their lives for the most part. I mean, these are generalizations, of course, but I agree. I think that the way in which we can live with somebody in that close, loving, kind of intimate relationship varies now. It doesn't have to be marriage, right? There's a lot of other options for us. And I think, you know, with going back to your original question of is this a good thing or not a good thing in terms of starting families later and marriage later, I tend to think there's a little bit of both in there. I think there are a lot of pluses, but I also think that there could be some difficulties as well. I think one of the problems with the waiting to have children until, you know, my career is established, my relationships, you know, stable, is that a lot of women are also getting caught up in this biological window of opportunity that they have, that whereby their fertility rates are great for having kids. And you know, it's pushing those boundaries. So that creates its own form of stress and difficulty in a family. And you know, that is the minus that we all have to be thinking about as well. I think.
The Wall Street Journal recently reported that, there has been a boom in fertility treatments. Are there any things to keep in mind before having children?
I think most women, if you ask them, would you rather have a natural pregnancy and not need intervention like that? Obviously most people would say they would prefer not to have to go that route if they didn't have to. So I think in terms of planning, you really have to be thinking about what years I need to be considering when to start,
Right.
if you want to avoid that, because we do have limitations in terms of our years of childbearing years. So it's just a fact of life that we have those constraints, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. And if someone happens to be in a relationship at that time and has a partner, those earlier conversations of, do you want a family one day? And if those conversations can take place, it may kind of influence that woman or that man or whichever your partner is to say, okay, well, let's make an appointment with a doctor and let's kind of talk about what are our options today and when should we be taking some action.
Right. Yeah. Open discussion. That's good.
Yes.
Well, time for a short break. Next, how a popular reality show plans to show just how different millennials really are compared to previous generations. Stay tuned. Welcome back to It's All Millennial. I'm your host, Ashley Kreze. Finally today, we're going to change gears a little to end the show on a bit of a fun note. We've been talking about how millennial parents differ from previous generations. My guests with me in studio are Karen Skinelis, Director of the Ontario Parenting Education Centre, and Brittany Bennett, New York State licensed mental health counselor with Bridge Over Troubled Water. So ladies, for those of you tuned into reality TV, there's one show that aims to reveal just how different Gen Y and Gen Z are. This year's Survivor, which is in actually its 33rd season, I can't believe that,
Wow.
is about millennials and Gen Xers. On the show, the youngest millennial is 18 and still in high school, while the oldest Gen Xer is 53. So far, the show's oldest contestant has made comments about having to walk to the store for milk, getting trophies for everything. While another Gen Xer says that millennials expect everything to be handed to them and they don't want to work. Surprise, surprise, right? So now as exciting and popular this show is, it's actually drawing a lot of harsh criticism from the online community. Some critics accuse the show of actually stereotyping the generations. So what do you ladies feel? Do you feel like these facts, do you feel like this in fact are stereotypes, or is there actual some truth to it?
Oh boy, I think they are stereotypes. I think we have all kinds of people in the different generations, and to really label or color a whole group of people as being spoiled or entitled, it's just not fair. I just see so many of them that are so hardworking, caring people, involved, committed. In fact, I think that this generation is really going to be a fantastic generation for the future.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Brittany, how about you? What do you think?
I think it's slightly a little bit harsh the way that the millennials are viewed, and I think that's because technology has advanced so much and society has changed so much with all of that, and I think that it's not so much that things are handed to this newer generation, it's that there is no other choice. You don't have to go to the library anymore to go read a book to get your information. We can now use our mobile devices and pull it up within seconds. So it's not so much that maybe it's lazy or handed to us, it's just a new way of life that's just more accessible.
So why do you think we get such a bad rap? Is it justified?
You know what?
It depends.
I think parenting styles have changed dramatically, and I think that in some ways we have become more permissive. And when we get into permissive parenting, one of the problems would be that sense of entitlement. So, there's some legitimacy to that observation. I wouldn't say it's completely off base, but I wouldn't say that all of us, all that generation, it would be fair to call them entitled and lazy and things like that.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. That was very well said.
Yeah, me too. So on the show, the contestants have to work together as a team, right? There was a study that found that millennials prefer working together in small groups or in a team environment as opposed to working independently. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it could be that in school they're doing more. I think there's a bigger emphasis on teamwork in schools, so I think kids are exposed to that a lot more in the classroom. We understand that to succeed in life, one of the main skills we have to have is that cooperation, collaboration, problem solving in groups. So we put an emphasis on that in terms of the elementary years. Kids are really taught to do that, and perhaps that's why, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think, though, is it taking away from the independent skills if we're sort of been conditioned to work in a group format or have the reliance on others?
I think that there's a couple different answers for that. I think that today we really value independence and having choices, but as Karen was saying, you know, there is that cooperation aspect that's imperative and essential to progressing in any way of life. And I also find that people really do genuinely want to feel connected to another person. So I totally can agree and understand that point of view.
Yeah, well, that's good. So now onto a fun question, right? If you were stuck on an island and you either had to be Team Gen X or Team Millennial to survive, which team would you choose and why?
There's pros and cons to both. That's a tough question.
You must choose.
You know what? I think I'd probably go with the older generation for one reason, and I think that in my observation, I could be wrong, and someone might not agree with me, but they tend to be more patient. And again, these millennials are information gathering right at your fingertips, so I think that there may be more patience, especially in a show like Survivor.
Karen, how about you?
Okay, good answer, good answer. And then I'm thinking, you know, I'm getting older. If I was stuck on an island, I'd want some stronger, younger people there with me. You know, to climb the trees for the coconuts and things like that.
Very rational, logical answer, Karen.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know.
Yeah, that's a tough question, isn't it?
Pros and cons to both.
How about a mixture? We have a group of both on the
wow.
island with us.
Wonderful.
Yeah, oh, great. Well, you know what, since I'm the host, I think I'm just going to remain neutral and not pick a side, probably better that way. But with that said, I just want to say may the best generation win, and good luck to everybody on the show. This will do it for this episode. I want to thank our guests for joining us on set today, Karen Skinelis, Director of the Ontario Parenting Education Centre, and Brittany Bennett, New York State licensed mental health counselor with Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Thank you.
And of course, thank you for watching. Here's how to connect with us, our website, www.itsallmillennial.com. And be sure to follow us on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn for everything to do with Generation Y. See you next time.